Think about the most sacred objects you can imagine: relics, believed to hold the very power of divinity, touched by saints, or present at moments that shaped faith itself. Now picture them not sealed behind iron gates or buried in deep vaults, but resting in the open, hidden where anyone could see them, yet where almost no one would truly notice. This was the breathtaking genius of the Knights Templar, an order of warrior monks who became history's most elusive guardians of holy treasure. We often see them depicted as fierce crusaders clad in white mantles emblazoned with red crosses, but behind the image of the soldier lay the mind of a strategist, an architect of secrets, a keeper of mysteries woven into the very fabric of the medieval world. These men didn't just build fortresses, they designed illusions. They didn't just guard relics, they disguised them in the rhythm of daily life, in the stones of their chapels, in the symbols carved into their walls, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary and the obvious into the invisible. What drove this unparalleled need for secrecy? It was more than just protecting gold or jewels. The items entrusted to the Templars, fragments of the true cross, vessels from the Last Supper, bones of apostles, were seen as conduits to the divine, objects that could heal, inspire, and even alter the course of history. To lose them wasn't just a tactical failure, it was a spiritual catastrophe, and so the Templars mastered something far more powerful than brute force: the art of psychological misdirection. They understood human nature intimately: how our eyes skip over the familiar, how our minds dismiss what seems routine. They hid precious relics in plain sight, not because it was easy, but because it was brilliant. In a world full of treasure hunters, rival orders, and kings hungry for power, the safest place for something sacred was often right under everyone's nose, camouflaged by its own holiness. In this video, we're going to pull back the curtain on these centuries-old secrets. We'll explore how the Templars used advanced architectural design, coded symbolism, and even everyday worship items to shield their treasures from pillage and persecution. You'll see how their methods went beyond simple hiding. They wove secrecy into their very identity, creating a legacy that blurs the line between history and legend. This isn't just a story about where objects were stored. It's about why they mattered, how they were protected, and what their concealment reveals about faith, power, and the timeless human desire to preserve what is most sacred. So join us on this journey into the shadows and light of the medieval mind, where the deepest truths are often hidden in the last places you would ever think to look. To grasp the sheer audacity of hiding something priceless in the open, we must first understand who was doing the hiding. The story begins not with grand castles or vast treasures, but with a handful of dedicated knights and a solemn, almost impossible vow. In the year 1119, in the volatile aftermath of the First Crusade, two French knights, Hugues de Payens and Godfrey de Saint-Omer, presented a radical idea to the King of Jerusalem. They proposed a new kind of monastic order, one composed of warriors who would take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but whose primary duty would be to protect the streams of Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. These travelers faced constant danger from bandits and hostile forces on the roads between the port of Jaffa and the holy city of Jerusalem. And so, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon were born. They were given headquarters on the Temple Mount, believed to be the site of King Solomon's temple, which gifted them the name that would echo through history, the Knights Templar. Their beginnings were marked by genuine poverty, their seal famously depicting two knights sharing a single horse, a powerful symbol of their early humility and brotherhood. But their mission resonated deeply with the Christian nobility of Europe. they received an unimaginable public relations boost in 1129 at the Council of Troyes, where the influential Abbot Bernard of Clairvaux, a towering figure in the church, passionately endorsed them. He drafted their strict monastic rule and praised them as a new breed of holy warrior, combining the monastic life's piety with the knight's martial prowess. This papal endorsement was a game-changer. It granted them something unprecedented: exemption from all local laws and taxes, answering only to the Pope himself. This freedom supercharged their growth. Donations of land, money, and noble sons eager to join their ranks flooded in from across Europe. This is where their narrative transforms from a charitable brotherhood into a medieval multinational corporation. They innovated in ways that seem remarkably modern. Pilgrims could deposit funds at a Templar preceptory in London and withdraw it in Jerusalem using a coded letter of credit, a system that protected them from theft on their long journey. They became the bankers for kings and popes, managing vast estates, fleets of ships, and complex agricultural and mining operations. This immense financial network, combined with their constant flow of new recruits and donations, created a reservoir of wealth and influence unlike anything seen before. They were simultaneously a standing army, a global bank, a real estate conglomerate, and a deeply devout religious order. This unique duality, monk and soldier, is the crucial key to understanding their role as relic guardians. As monks, they had the spiritual authority and devotional integrity to be entrusted with Christendom's most sacred objects. They understood the theological gravity of a relic, the belief that it was a tangible bridge to the divine. As warriors, they possessed the military might, strategic discipline, and logistical capability to protect these treasures from any threat. They controlled key holy sites, giving them first access to discoveries and a sacred duty to preserve them. Their power was not just in their swords or their wealth, but in their unique position at the intersection of faith and force. This absolute trust, coupled with absolute power, provided the perfect conditions for them to develop their sophisticated systems of secrecy. They had the resources to build elaborate hiding places, the network to move treasures across continents, and the sworn loyalty of members who would rather die than betray their secrets. Their rise from humble protectors to masters of fortune set the stage for their greatest, most enduring legacy: the art of making the sacred invisible by placing it where everyone could see. But to truly appreciate the genius of their concealment, we must first understand what was being hidden. These weren't mere artifacts or simple valuables. In the medieval mind, a sacred relic was a physical conduit to the divine, an object crackling with spiritual power. Imagine living in a world where heaven felt intimately close yet physically distant. Relics bridged that gap. A fragment of wood wasn't just old timber. It was a piece of the true cross, believed to carry the echo of Christ's sacrifice and capable of performing miracles. A bone from an apostle was not a mere skeletal remain. It was a direct link to the foundation of the church, a source of blessings that could heal the sick or protect a community from plague. This belief system, known as real presence, meant the holiness of the saint or the sacred event was genuinely present within the object itself. It was a tangible piece of the infinite, and to possess it was to hold a measure of that power. This profound belief fueled one of the most powerful economic and social engines of the Middle Ages: pilgrimage. Ordinary people would undertake journeys of incredible hardship, traveling hundreds of miles on foot across treacherous terrain, to stand in the presence of these holy objects. They did this seeking healing, seeking forgiveness, or seeking a deeper connection to their faith. A cathedral or monastery that housed a major relic, like the supposed skull of John the Baptist or the tunic of the Virgin Mary, became a destination, a spiritual powerhouse that attracted thousands of pilgrims each year. And with those pilgrims came donations, patronage, and immense prestige. The entire economy of a town like Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela was built upon the relics they housed. For the Templars, who safeguarded the routes these pilgrims traveled and often the holy sites they sought, this spiritual economy was part of their daily reality. They weren't just protecting objects, they were protecting the very hope and devotion of countless believers. Kings and emperors were not immune to this allure. In fact, they were some of the most avid collectors. For a ruler, possessing a significant relic was a powerful tool of political legitimization. It demonstrated that God favored their reign, lending a divine right to their authority. A crown containing a thorn from Christ's crown of thorns was more than a symbol of royalty. It was a declaration of heavenly endorsement. These objects were often carried into battle, believed to guarantee victory by invoking divine intervention. The Templars, with their vast network and presence in the Holy Land, were in a unique position to acquire, authenticate, and transport these most sought-after items. They became the trusted brokers and guardians for Europe's most powerful figures, a role that came with immense responsibility and even greater risk. The value of what they protected was incalculable, not in terms of gold, but in terms of faith, power, and destiny. This context transforms the Templars' task from simple security into a sacred duty of the highest order. Their concealment methods were not merely about preventing theft by common thieves, though that was a concern. The greater threat came from rival powers, other knightly orders, greedy nobles, or even monarchs who might seek to steal a relic to bolster their own influence. There was also the constant danger of desecration by adversaries during periods of conflict. If a relic was captured or destroyed, it wasn't just a loss of property, it was a spiritual catastrophe, a blow to the morale of all Christendom. The Templars understood that they were preserving something far greater than an object. They were safeguarding a focal point of prayer, a source of miracles, a tangible fragment of the divine narrative. In a world often filled with violence, disease, and uncertainty, these relics were anchors of hope. Hiding them was an act of profound reverence, a way to ensure that this connection to the divine would survive the chaos of the age, waiting to inspire future generations. Their secrecy was ultimately an act of deep faith. So how exactly do you hide something that everyone is desperately looking for? The Templars discovered that the answer wasn't to bury it deeper, but to change the way people saw the world around them. They became masters of a subtle art we might call psychological misdirection, a concept that feels surprisingly modern but was executed with medieval brilliance. Think about your own daily routine. How many times do you walk past the same street sign, the same painting on a wall, or the same piece of furniture without truly seeing it? Our brains are wired to create shortcuts, to filter out the constant noise of the familiar, to focus on what seems new or threatening. The Templars understood this innate human tendency better than anyone. They realized that the most secure vault wasn't a locked room guarded by soldiers. It was a space so ordinary, so integrated into daily life, that it became functionally invisible to anyone who didn't know its secret. This strategy of hiding in plain sight wasn't something they invented from nothing. They drew upon a deep well of ancient traditions. In the classical world, for instance, the early Christians in Rome used simple symbols like the fish to identify each other while avoiding persecution, embedding profound meaning within an image that appeared innocuous to outsiders. The Templars took this foundational idea and refined it with the resources and ingenuity of the High Middle Ages. They created a system where the sacred and the mundane weren't just neighbors, they were one and the same. A beautifully carved stone archway in a chapel wasn't merely decorative. Its specific curvature might mark the location of a hollow space behind it. A heavy, often used candlestick on an altar might unscrew at the base to reveal a tiny compartment holding a fragment of cloth from a saint's robe. The genius was in the dual purpose. These objects were used in sacred rituals every day, handled with reverence, yet their true hidden nature was protected by that very act of devotion. To a searching knight or a greedy official, a golden reliquary sitting on a pedestal was an obvious target. But who would think to dismantle the altar itself, the very heart of worship, on a suspicion that its stones contained something more? This approach required a deep understanding of their adversaries' psychology. They knew that anyone raiding a Templar preceptory would be driven by haste, greed, and a certain expectation of where treasure should be. They would go straight for the strongboxes, the treasury, the obvious stores of wealth. Their eyes would scan for locks to pick and chests to pry open. The Templars used this expectation against them, sometimes even planting decoys. A chest of silver coins left somewhat easily accessible to satisfy a raider's greed and convince them they had found the prize, all while the truly priceless relics remained undisturbed in the walls around them. This wasn't just about practical security. It was a form of intellectual and spiritual jujitsu, using the enemy's own force and assumptions to defeat them. It reveals an order that was as philosophically sophisticated as it was militarily powerful, blending a warrior's understanding of strategy with a monk's contemplative insight into human nature. They protected divinity not by distancing it from humanity, but by weaving it seamlessly into the tapestry of everyday existence, trusting that the most powerful secrets are those that rest quietly in the light, waiting for the right eyes to see them. This mastery of perception was then translated into physical form through their architectural genius, where the very buildings they constructed became active participants in the grand deception. Stepping into a Templar chapel or commandery was not merely entering a place of worship. It was walking into a meticulously designed puzzle box made of stone. Their most iconic contribution to medieval architecture was the round church, a design directly inspired by the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. The circular layout was rich with spiritual symbolism, representing the perfection of God and the celestial harmony of the heavens. But for the initiated, this geometry served a far more practical and clandestine purpose. The absence of a long nave and the focus on a central altar created a unique acoustic environment where a whisper could travel in unexpected ways, and it also allowed for a radial symmetry that perfectly disguised structural secrets. Beneath the flagstones of these round churches often lay extensive underground networks, crypts, tunnels, and chambers that were not on any public blueprint. The entrance to these subterranean spaces was the ultimate test of knowledge. It might be triggered by rotating a specific stone in the wall that appeared identical to its neighbors, or by stepping on a particular sequence of floor tiles that released a hidden latch. In the Templar commandery at Toma in Portugal, legend speaks of a complex system of wells and underground passages that served as both a water source and a clandestine storage area, accessible only through a disguised opening in the chapter house. These hidden depths were not dank, forgotten cellars. They were carefully constructed vaults, often with stable temperatures and humidity levels ideal for preserving delicate organic relics like wood or cloth, protecting them from decay as well as discovery. The Templars' use of sacred geometry extended far beyond the circle. They employed principles like the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence, proportions believed to be divinely inspired and inherently beautiful in the layout of their buildings. A window's dimensions, the spacing between columns, or the height of a vaulted ceiling might all be determined by these mathematical ratios. To the average worshipper, This created a subliminal sense of order, beauty, and spiritual elevation. However, for the knight who knew the code, these same ratios could act as a measuring system, pinpointing the exact location of a concealed compartment. An octagonal tower, a common feature in many Templar sites, wasn't just a stylish architectural choice. The 8 sides could represent the 8 Beatitudes, but they could also provide 8 separate wall surfaces, one of which might be a false facade leading to a narrow staircase or a vertical shaft designed to hide precious objects. Perhaps their most ingenious trick was the creation of dual-purpose structural elements. A massive, load-bearing column in the center of a room might be partially hollow, with a removable capstone at the top, reachable only by ladder, allowing small items to be secreted away inside the very pillar that held up the roof. A fireplace might have a flue that branched off not just to the chimney but into a small, soot-blackened cavity in the wall, a place no one would ever think to search. Even the altar, the most sacred focal point of any chapel, was often a masterpiece of concealment. While it appeared to be a solid block of stone, it could be constructed with a hidden drawer or a sliding panel at its base, allowing a relic to be placed literally at the heart of the divine service, touched by the priest during Mass, yet completely safe from any outside threat. The architecture itself became a silent guardian, a permanent and unwavering sentry that never slept, ensuring that their sacred charges remained hidden in the most brilliant way possible, integrated into the immutable structure of faith itself. But to truly navigate this world of hidden messages, you had to learn to read the room in a way few others could. The Templars didn't just use grand official symbols, they embedded clues in the most unassuming places. A casual scratch on a stone wall might look like random vandalism, but to a knowing eye, it was a carefully carved arrow, its length and angle indicating the number of paces to take from a specific corner. The intricate patterns in a floor mosaic, beautiful to any observer, could contain a more profound secret. A deliberate break in a symmetrical pattern, a tile of a slightly different color, or a unique arrangement of geometric shapes might mark the precise spot where a floor stone could be pried up to reveal a cavity beneath. Even the majestic stained glass windows flooding the chapels with divine light served a dual purpose. The specific saints depicted, the colors of their robes, or the objects they held could all be part of a mnemonic device. A window showing Saint John holding a chalice might not just be illustrating a biblical scene. It could be a direct reference to the nature of the relic hidden nearby, perhaps a vessel believed to be the Holy Grail itself. The entire building became a multidimensional map where art, architecture, and devotion intertwined to create a secure filing system for their most precious secrets. This complex language of symbols and codes required an immense amount of trust and training. Knowledge was compartmentalized and passed down orally within the inner circle of knights. A senior member might teach a junior initiate how to interpret a specific set of symbols relevant only to one preceptory, ensuring that no single member, even under torture, could reveal the entire network. This system of limited information was their greatest defense against betrayal. The meaning behind a double-headed eagle carving or a specific sequence of crosses was not written in any manual. It was locked in the minds of the trusted few. This transformed their spaces into something more than just buildings. They became living, breathing entities that only communicated with those who knew how to listen. Walking through a Templar commandery was like walking through a conversation happening just below the threshold of hearing, a silent dialogue between the order and itself, written in stone and glass, ensuring their treasures remained safe through the ultimate combination of artistic beauty and operational secrecy. Perhaps the most elegant and psychologically astute of all their methods was the seamless integration of sacred relics into the very objects used in daily worship. This approach leveraged the profound respect and ritualistic handling these items already commanded. Consider the humble chalice, the central vessel of the Catholic Mass, used to hold the wine that, through transubstantiation, becomes the blood of Christ. To a devout Templar knight, this object was already the height of sanctity. Now imagine that same chalice crafted from silver or gold, its stem expertly hollowed out. Within this secret cavity, accessible only by unscrewing the base along a seam invisible to the naked eye, could rest a tiny fragment of wood purported to be from the true cross. Every time the priest raised the chalice during the consecration, he was not only elevating the Eucharist but also, unknowingly to the congregation, elevating one of the most sought-after relics in Christendom. The object's sacred nature was its ultimate protection. The idea of dismantling it to check for hidden compartments would have been considered an act of sacrilege, a thought that simply would not occur to a believer. This principle extended far beyond chalices. The censer, swung to spread fragrant incense throughout the chapel during services, often had a second, smaller internal chamber above the burning coals. This space, shielded from the heat, could hold sacred ashes or soil from a holy site like Golgotha. With every swing, the scent of incense mingled with the faint, sanctified dust, releasing a physical manifestation of holiness into the air, all while the relic remained completely concealed. Even the beautiful, ornate reliquaries designed to publicly display relics could themselves be decoys or part of a larger ruse. A grand, bejeweled casket might sit prominently on an altar, drawing the eye of any visitor, while the truly significant relic was tucked into a plain, unadorned wooden box that had been built into the structure of the altar itself, touched only by the priest during preparations. They mastered the art of the false bottom, the weighted base, and the threaded compartment, turning craftsmanship into a tool of deception. The altar itself, the heart of any Templar chapel, was frequently the greatest masterpiece of this integrated concealment. While it appeared to be a single, massive block of stone, it was often a complex construction. A slab on the top might pivot or slide aside to reveal a small cavity, a resting place for a relic that would be physically present during the most sacred moment of the Mass. This practice, known as the Ceiling of Relics in an altar stone, was and still is a part of Catholic tradition, but the Templars took it to another level of secrecy and sophistication. For them, it wasn't just a symbolic act, it was a functional security measure. The relic became part of the altar's consecration, making the entire structure holy and therefore beyond suspicion. This method perfectly encapsulates their genius. It didn't just hide an object, it transformed its hiding place into something so revered that its integrity was inviolable. The line between devotion and disguise didn't just blur, it vanished entirely. The act of worship became the act of protection, and faith itself became the most impenetrable vault. While their methods of hiding relics within plain sight were brilliantly deceptive, the Templars also understood the timeless power of going deep, of burying secrets literally beneath the feet of those who might seek them. This leads us to their second master strategy, the creation and utilization of extensive underground networks and crypts. Beneath the bustling courtyards and solemn chapels of their commanderies, a hidden world existed, a labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and vaults carved from the living rock. These were not merely basements or storage cellars, they were sophisticated, purpose-built subterranean complexes, engineered for absolute secrecy and perfect preservation. Access was never straightforward. A hidden entrance might be concealed behind a pivoting section of stone wall in the chapel, disguised as part of the intricate masonry. Another could be located in the chapter house, the room where the knights held their most private meetings, hidden under a heavy trapdoor camouflaged to look like the rest of the tiled floor. These entrances were known only to the highest-ranking members, and approaching them often required performing a specific, ritualized sequence of actions, turning a sconce, pressing a sequence of stones, or pulling a specific book in a library that would unlock the passageway. The environment these tunnels led to was chosen with meticulous care. Deep underground, the temperature and humidity remain remarkably constant, cool and dry throughout the year. This created ideal conditions for preserving organic relics that would otherwise succumb to decay, fragments of wood, ancient textiles, or parchment documents. These spaces were also naturally soundproof and isolated, ensuring that any activity within remained completely undetected from the world above. In many cases, the Templars didn't just dig new tunnels, they integrated and expanded upon existing natural formations. A pre-existing cave system or a set of ancient ruins, perhaps from Roman or even earlier times, could be incorporated into their network, adding layers of historical obscurity to their own secrecy. This practice of building upon the old made it incredibly difficult for anyone later to determine what was original and what was a Templar modification, further muddying the waters for any potential treasure hunters. The legends surrounding these underground spaces are as vast as the chambers themselves were said to be. In Toma, Portugal, the heart of the Templar presence in that country, stories persist of a vast, multi-level underground city beneath the Convent of Christ. This network, allegedly accessed through the famous Charola, the Templar church, is said to include not just storage rooms but entire halls, wells, and escape routes that stretch for kilometers. Similarly, beneath the site of the Paris Temple, their powerful European headquarters, rumors have circulated for centuries of immense vaults that once held the Order's central treasury and their most sacred relics. When the temple was demolished after the French Revolution, workers reported discovering strange, sealed underground chambers, though their contents, if any, were never officially documented. These legends speak to a scale of ambition that is breathtaking. The Templars weren't just digging holes, they were sculpting a secret second world, a geospatial safe deposit box built into the foundation of their known world. Protection in these depths went beyond mere concealment. The passages were often narrow, forcing any intruder to proceed single file, making them vulnerable. Some were said to be booby-trapped with counterweighted stones, false floors that gave way to pits, or carefully designed water channels that could be unleashed to flood tunnels in an emergency. But the most effective security was often human. Trusted knights would have taken turns standing guard in the darkness, their presence a final, formidable barrier between the outside world and the sacred objects in their care. This merging of the natural environment with human ingenuity created a security system that was both profoundly simple and incredibly sophisticated. They used the Earth's own stability to protect against time, and the cool, dark silence to protect against discovery. In these hidden depths, the Templars didn't just store treasure, they embedded their legacy into the very bedrock of history, ensuring that even if their order above ground was eradicated, a part of them would remain, waiting silently in the dark for a future that might never come to light. While their underground vaults were masterpieces of hidden engineering, the Templars' true stroke of genius was in turning the most visible parts of their buildings into the ultimate disguise. This method of camouflage within plain architecture took the principle of hiding in plain sight and literally built it into the walls. Think about how we interact with structures today. We walk on floors, lean against walls, and admire decorative columns without ever considering that these elements could be anything more than what they appear. The Templars exploited this universal blind spot with breathtaking precision. A massive stone column supporting a vaulted ceiling wasn't just a feat of engineering, it could be a carefully crafted container. The builders would leave a hollow core, accessible only by removing a specific keystone at the very top, a task requiring a ladder and specific knowledge, effectively placing the secret high above the line of sight and reach of any casual intruder. The weight of the roof itself became the guardian, as damaging the pillar to search it would risk bringing the entire structure down. This architectural deception extended to the very floors people walked upon. What appeared to be a seamless expanse of flagstones could actually be a complex puzzle. A specific tile, indistinguishable from its neighbors in color and wear, might not be mortared in place. Instead, it could be balanced on a clever pivot or counterweight system. By inserting a thin blade into a nearly invisible seam and applying pressure in just the right way, a knight could lift a section of the floor to reveal a shallow cavity beneath, perfect for storing rolled parchments or small, flat relics like a piece of the true cross. The constant foot traffic of worshippers and brothers alike would only serve to grind dust into the seams, further camouflaging the secret and ensuring the stone settled perfectly into place, hiding its own mystery through daily use. The most sacred space was often directly underfoot, protected by the sheer ordinariness of the ground itself. Perhaps the most daring hiding places were those embedded within the devotional art that adorned their chapels. A life-sized statue of a saint, carved with exquisite detail and painted in vibrant colors, might be more than an object of veneration. The head, carefully crafted to appear as a single piece of stone or wood, could be designed to unscrew at the neck. Inside this hollow space, a relic associated with that very saint, a tooth, a finger bone, a lock of hair, could be placed, literally putting the sacred remains inside the representation of the holy figure. This created a profound spiritual symmetry. The faithful would pray to the saint, their eyes fixed on the statue's face, completely unaware that the physical essence of that saint was present within the very object of their devotion. The artistic beauty of the carving discouraged any close inspection that might reveal its secret, as such an act would be seen as disrespectful. The Templars understood that sometimes the best way to hide something was to place it at the very center of attention, transforming a public monument into a private reliquary. And if the grand architecture and sacred rituals provided one layer of disguise, the Templars' fourth method was perhaps their most philosophically daring: the art of the decoy, using the utterly commonplace to hide the celestial. This strategy moved beyond the church walls and into the daily grind of medieval life, into the barns, workshops, and libraries of their vast commanderies. Here, they employed a form of reverse psychology so clever it borders on brilliance. While a raiding party would ransack a chapel for golden reliquaries, they would completely overlook the tools of manual labor. A knight's spiritual duty was intertwined with the practical work of the estate, and they leveraged this to stunning effect. Imagine a heavy, iron-tipped plowshare, its wooden handle smoothed and darkened by the sweat and grip of countless hands. To any observer, it was a symbol of humble toil, worth little more than the wood and metal it was made from. But that same handle could be expertly bored out, its hollow core serving as a perfect sheath for a long, thin relic, perhaps a bone from the arm of a saint or a sliver of wood from a holy cross. After use, it would be leaned against a barn wall, surrounded by identical tools, its incredible secret guarded by its own overwhelming mundanity. This principle extended to furniture. A common chest, used to store linens or grain, would be an unremarkable sight in any dormitory or storeroom. Yet, its construction could include a false bottom, a shallow compartment separated from the main storage area by a thin panel of wood. The space above might hold rough blankets or common utensils, while the space below, inaccessible without knowing the precise trick to removing the panel, could cradle a sacred text wrapped in silk or a jewel-encrusted cross. The very act of using the chest for its intended purpose, opening it to fetch a blanket, reinforced its identity as a simple piece of furniture, effectively camouflaging its true purpose through routine. Even books, rare and valuable as they were, could be used in this deceptive way. A thick psalter or a volume of monastic rules might have its binding altered to include a hidden pocket between the leather cover and the wooden board, large enough to hold a folded piece of cloth believed to be from the shroud of Christ. The book would be used in daily prayers, its sacred contents literally hidden within another sacred text, protected by layers of devotion and disguise. This tactic was far more than a simple security measure. It was a profound theological statement, a physical manifestation of the order's core identity. Remember their full name, the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The word poor was central to their original vow of humility. By hiding the most powerful relics inside the most humble objects, they were embodying a central Christian paradox, that greatness is found in service and divinity in the ordinary. They were making a bold argument that holiness isn't always found on a golden pedestal under the glow of candlelight. Sometimes it's present in the handle of a plow, in the grain of a common chest, in the well-thumbed pages of a daily prayer book. It was a belief that grace infuses the everyday world, and that the most powerful secrets are those that don't demand attention. This method required a deep, genuine humility from the knights who knew the secrets. They had to walk past these objects every day, seeing not just a tool or a piece of furniture, but the sacred charge it contained, all while maintaining the illusion of its ordinariness. It was the ultimate test of their devotion, a constant, silent meditation on the true nature of value and faith. While the methods of hiding relics within their own architecture were brilliantly deceptive, the Templars understood the ultimate wisdom of not keeping all their most sacred eggs in one basket. This leads us to their fifth and perhaps most strategically profound method, geographic misdirection. The Order's immense network, stretching from the sun-baked hills of the Holy Land to the misty glens of Scotland, provided them with a unique advantage, the ability to spread their treasures across a vast and varied landscape. Rather than concentrating everything in their heavily fortified but highly visible urban commanderies like the Paris Temple, they utilized a decentralized approach, secreting items in remote, unassuming locations that were known only to a select few within their inner circle. This was a deliberate policy of risk management on a grand scale. If one preceptory was sacked, if one region fell into turmoil, the entire collection of sacred objects wouldn't be lost. By scattering them, they ensured the survival of their spiritual legacy, no matter what catastrophe might befall any single part of their order. The types of locations they chose were as strategic as they were secluded. They favored spots that were not just physically remote but also spiritually significant or geographically intimidating. Isolated hermitages, often perched on inaccessible cliffs or deep within ancient forests, were ideal. These places already had an aura of solitude and sanctity, attracting little attention from the outside world. A small, seemingly abandoned stone chapel in the French region of the Languedoc, accessible only by a treacherous goat path, could serve as a perfect sentinel for a hidden relic. Similarly, coastal caves, whose entrances were revealed only at low tide or were constantly battered by the North Atlantic waves, offered natural security that no man-made fortress could rival. The constant, thunderous noise of the sea would mask any sound of activity, and the perilous approach would deter all but the most determined and knowledgeable seekers. These locations weren't chosen at random. They were selected for their natural defenses and their ability to remain off the mental maps of their adversaries. This strategy is powerfully illustrated by the enduring legends that cling to specific, rugged landscapes. Take, for instance, the windswept islands off the coast of Scotland, such as Islay or the Isle of Mull. Following the suppression of the order in the early 14th century, many Templars are said to have fled to Scotland, finding refuge with noble families like the Sinclairs. Stories persist that they brought their most precious treasures with them, hiding them in sea caves along the jagged coastline or in underground chambers beneath the foundations of remote chapels. The sheer isolation of these places, combined with the fierce weather and the complex political landscape of medieval Scotland, made them perfect sanctuaries for secrets. Similarly, the mountainous and historically rebellious region of the Languedoc in southern France, a place with its own distinct culture and a history of defying central authority, is riddled with tales of Templar treasure. The ruins of Cathar castles like Montségur, which stood atop near impregnable peaks, are often linked to these stories, suggesting the Templars may have used pre-existing, forgotten strongholds as their own personal vaults, adding layers of historical mystery to their own. This approach reveals a masterful understanding of what we might call geographic psychology. The Templars were adept at reading not just maps, but human nature in relation to the land. They knew that a king's tax collector or a rival order's knight would focus their attention on centers of power and wealth: the castles, the bustling preceptories, the known repositories of gold. They would not devote vast resources to mounting expeditions into trackless forests, scaling desolate sea cliffs, or navigating politically volatile regions on a rumor. The remoteness itself was a filter, ensuring that only those with genuine knowledge and unwavering dedication would ever attempt the journey. This method required incredible logistical planning. Moving a priceless relic across hundreds of miles of rough medieval terrain, through territories controlled by different lords and potential enemies, was a monumental task. It demanded secrecy, trustworthy agents, and secure routes, all things the Templar network, with its preceptories acting as way stations, was uniquely equipped to provide. They turned the very geography of Europe into their ally, using distance and difficulty as the primary guards for their most sacred charges, proving that sometimes the safest place to hide something is simply very, very far away from where anyone would ever think to look. But the most brilliant architectural deception or the most remote geographic hiding place would have been utterly useless if the wrong people knew their secrets. The human element, the knight himself, was both the greatest strength and the most vulnerable point in this entire system. This is why the Templars developed an intricate culture of initiation and secrecy, a psychological fortress designed to protect information with the same ferocity that they defended a physical stronghold. The entire operation relied on a principle we now call compartmentalization. No single member, not even the highest-ranking Grand Master, likely knew the location of every relic or the full extent of the hidden network. Knowledge was carefully distributed on a strict need-to-know basis. A knight stationed in Portugal might be fully aware of the secrets of the Toma Commandery, but know absolutely nothing about the vaults beneath the Paris Temple. This was a masterstroke of operational security. If a knight was captured, tortured, or tempted to betray the order, he could only reveal the information within his own compartment. He might give up one hiding place, but he could never unravel the entire web. This meant that the loss of one location, while tragic, would not spell the end for their entire sacred mission. The system was designed to survive the failure of any single part, including the fall of any individual member. This culture of secrecy was forged from the very first moment a man sought to join the order. The initiation rites were not mere formalities. They were profound psychological experiences designed to test commitment, build an unbreakable bond of brotherhood, and sear the importance of silence into the soul of the new recruit. Imagine a prospective knight brought into a dimly lit chapter house. He would be subjected to hours of intense questioning about his faith and his motives. He might be forced to undertake a blindfolded journey, led by trusted brothers through a series of confusing turns, both physically and mentally, to disorient him and symbolize his passage from the profane world into the sacred mystery of the Order. This sensory deprivation heightened his awareness and made the eventual revelation of secrets feel like a monumental unveiling. During the ceremony itself, he would take solemn, terrifying oaths on sacred scripture, vowing absolute poverty, chastity, and obedience. But woven into these standard monastic vows were additional, grave promises of secrecy. He would swear never to reveal the Order's internal affairs, its financial dealings, and especially the nature and location of the treasures in its care. The consequences of breaking these oaths were described in stark spiritual terms: eternal damnation, excommunication, and the wrath of both God and his brothers. This wasn't just a threat, it was a theological reality for a medieval Christian, making the cost of betrayal unthinkably high. Beyond the formal oaths, the Templars cultivated a rich tapestry of symbolic rituals and covert signals that reinforced this wall of secrecy daily. They developed coded handshakes, specific ways of grasping another knight's forearm that would silently identify a trusted brother. They used passphrases, snippets of scripture, or seemingly innocent greetings that, when delivered with the correct inflection or at a specific time of day, would serve as a password. The meaning of certain symbols carved into their buildings, a specific arrangement of crosses, a unique knotwork pattern, might be explained only to those who had attained a certain rank. This created a world within a world, a second layer of reality invisible to outsiders, servants, and even lower-ranking members. For the initiated, a walk through a preceptory was a constant, silent conversation. A glance, a gesture, a hand placed on a particular stone in a particular way, these were the keys that unlocked doors, both literal and metaphorical. This shared, hidden knowledge created an incredibly powerful in-group bond. The knights who knew the secrets were bound together not just by duty, but by a shared, profound experience of mystery. They were the guardians of a truth that the outside world could not comprehend, and this shared burden forged a trust that was as strong as steel. The relics were safe not just behind stone walls, but behind a wall of human loyalty that had been meticulously constructed through ritual, symbolism, and a shared sacred purpose. Yet for all their ingenuity in building these hidden vaults and coded messages, the Templars were not operating in a peaceful vacuum. Their entire world was a pressure cooker of looming threats, and this constant state of peril is what transformed their concealment methods from a clever strategy into an absolute necessity for survival. The danger they faced was not a single monster, but a hydra of rivalries, greed, and outright hostility that came at them from every direction. First and foremost were their fellow military orders, particularly the Knights Hospitaller. While publicly they were brothers in arms, both dedicated to the protection of pilgrims and the Christian presence in the Holy Land, a fierce and often bitter rivalry simmered just beneath the surface. They competed for the same donations, the same papal favor, and the same stream of noble-born recruits. A major relic held by the Templars was a powerful draw for pilgrims, and thus for the wealth and influence those pilgrims brought. The Hospitallers would have had a powerful incentive to acquire such objects for themselves by any means necessary. This created an environment where even an ally could not be fully trusted with the knowledge of where the most precious treasures were hidden. The threat escalated dramatically when you moved from rival orders to the crowned heads of Europe. The Templars' vast financial network made them the bankers to kings, but this placed them in an incredibly precarious position. Monarchs like Philip IV of France were chronically indebted to the order, having borrowed enormous sums to fund their endless wars and lavish court lifestyles. For a king drowning in debt, the simplest solution wasn't to repay the loan, it was to eliminate the banker. The Templars' wealth, both in coin and in sacred objects, represented a tantalizing prize that could solve a kingdom's financial woes overnight, and just as importantly, provide the relics that would sanctify a king's rule with an aura of divine approval. A holy relic displayed in a royal chapel was a powerful symbol, telling every subject and rival that God himself endorsed the monarch's power. This made the Templars' treasures a target for legal seizure, outright theft, or any other pretext a cunning king could devise. This simmering resentment and greed finally reached its terrifying climax in the early 14th century. King Philip IV of France, aptly known as Philip the Fair for his looks but not his morals, masterminded one of the most shocking and ruthless acts of political betrayal in history. Deeply in debt to the Templars and covetous of their wealth and power, he orchestrated a coordinated attack. On Friday, October 13, 1307, his officials across France simultaneously arrested hundreds of Templar knights, including the Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay. The charges were monstrous and almost certainly fabricated: heresy, blasphemy, idolatry, and sexual immorality. Philip then pressured a weak and pliant Pope, Clement V, to suppress the entire order, which he did in 1312. This was the ultimate threat realized. The very institutions that were supposed to be the Templars' protectors, the monarchy and the papacy, had turned against them with the full force of law and violence. Their properties were seized, their members imprisoned or executed, and their assets systematically looted. Official inventories were taken of their obvious wealth, their land, their castles, their gold plate. But the truly priceless items, the sacred relics, were often conspicuously absent from these lists. Their concealment had worked. In their darkest hour, when their world was being torn apart from the outside, the secrets hidden in plain sight remained just that, secret. But the danger wasn't only internal to Christendom. We must also consider the external military threats they faced for nearly 2 centuries. During the Crusades, relics were not just spiritual objects, they were powerful symbols of military and religious dominance. For Muslim forces, capturing a major Christian relic like a piece of the true cross would have been a devastating psychological blow to the Crusader states, a tangible sign that God had turned his favor away from them. The relics were, therefore, high-value military targets. A Templar preceptory on the frontier knew that it could be overrun at any moment. Burying treasure in the courtyard was a temporary measure. Integrating it into the very architecture, or hiding it within a humble object that an invading soldier would overlook or dismiss as worthless, was a permanent solution. Their methods ensured that even if the flag was captured and the castle burned, the heart of their faith, the physical evidence of their connection to the divine, could remain intact, waiting silently for the day it might be recovered. This constant multi-front pressure is what forged their secrecy into something so sophisticated. It wasn't paranoia, it was a calculated and brilliant response to a very real and present danger. Their hiding places were not just architectural features, they were a last line of defense, a final, silent vow to protect their sacred charge against all odds, even from the king and the Pope himself. Now let's turn our gaze to a structure that stands as one of the most magnificent achievements of the medieval world, Chartres Cathedral. While it was not built by the Knights Templar themselves, this soaring Gothic masterpiece in France serves as a fascinating and compelling case study. a place where the Order's philosophy of sacred concealment seems to have been woven into the very fabric of a public place of worship. The connection is not one of direct ownership but of profound influence and shared symbolic language. Many of the master masons and architects who worked on the great cathedrals were part of international guilds, networks of craftsmen who moved between projects, sharing esoteric knowledge and construction techniques. It is highly plausible, even likely, that artisans familiar with Templar designs and their hidden principles worked on Chartres, embedding their secrets within a monument intended for the entire world to see. This allows us to see how the Templars' methods of hiding in plain sight could be applied on a grand, breathtaking scale, transforming an entire cathedral into a potential blueprint for sacred secrecy. The most famous and enigmatic feature of Chartres is its massive labyrinth embedded into the stone floor of the nave. To the thousands of pilgrims who walk it, it is a spiritual tool, a symbolic journey to Jerusalem for those who could not make the actual pilgrimage. The path winds and turns in a complex 11-circuit pattern that is both mathematically precise and deeply meditative. But from a Templar perspective, this labyrinth could be far more than a metaphorical path. Scholars and researchers have long speculated that the labyrinth's precise geometry might act as a key or a map. The exact distances between its turns, the angles of its pathways, and its relationship to other architectural features in the cathedral could provide a set of geometric coordinates. If one were to take a specific point within the labyrinth, perhaps its center, and project lines outward following specific angles, they might intersect with particular pillars, specific stained glass windows, or points in the crypt below, potentially marking the locations of concealed chambers or sealed cavities. The labyrinth, in this view, is not just a path for prayer, it is a gigantic stone-coded diagram, its secret hiding in the most open part of the entire church, walked upon by countless feet, yet its true purpose unseen. This theory extends to the cathedral's famed stained glass windows, an explosion of celestial blue and vibrant narrative that floods the interior with divine light. Chartres possesses one of the most complete and original collections of medieval stained glass in the world, and each window tells a story from scripture or the lives of saints. Yet, some researchers propose that these stories contain a second, hidden layer of meaning. The specific placement of certain symbols, the colors chosen for particular robes, or the objects held by depicted figures might be more than just artistic choices. A window depicting the Virgin Mary might hold a clue to the whereabouts of her most famous relic, the Sancta Camisa, the tunic she purportedly wore at the birth of Christ, which has been housed at Chartres since the 9th century. Could the window be a guide, suggesting that the tunic on display is itself a decoy, and the true relic is hidden elsewhere, with the window's imagery pointing the way? Other windows, rich with Old Testament themes, have fueled speculation about even grander secrets, such as the whereabouts of the lost Ark of the Covenant. The Templars, through their extensive excavations on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, were rumored to have discovered ancient artifacts, and their influence on Gothic design may have provided a way to encode the knowledge of what they found and where they might have hidden it, turning biblical narratives into a potential treasure map rendered in light and glass. Beneath the cathedral lies another layer of mystery, the vast crypt, one of the largest in Europe. This underground space is itself a historical palimpsest, built upon the foundations of earlier churches and ancient pagan sites. The crypt's layout is not a simple basement. It contains its own chapels, corridors, and ancient wells. For those who believe in the Templar connection, this subterranean world is the most likely candidate for a major hiding place. The labyrinth on the floor above could be a guide to a specific point in the crypt, a section of wall that appears solid but, when pressed or manipulated in the correct way, reveals a hidden ossuary or a sealed niche. The strategic use of the crypt demonstrates the Templar principle of using the most sacred and heavily trafficked areas as a shield for their secrets. What better place to hide a relic of unimaginable importance than deep beneath the most revered pilgrimage site in France, a place so public that its very popularity becomes its greatest defense? The Chartres case study powerfully illustrates that the Templars' legacy was not confined to their own commanderies. Their genius for concealment, their mastery of symbolic coding, and their understanding of sacred geometry may have been exported, influencing the very heart of medieval Christianity and leaving behind a puzzle of stone and light that continues to challenge and captivate us to this day. Nestled in the lush Scottish countryside just south of Edinburgh, Roslyn Chapel appears at first glance to be a relatively small and late-built medieval church, its construction beginning in the mid-15th century, long after the Templars were officially dissolved. Yet to step inside is to enter a universe of stone that seems to vibrate with hidden meaning, a place where every surface is alive with a dizzying array of carvings so intricate and seemingly out of place that they have fueled centuries of speculation. This is not merely a chapel, it is a book written in a language of symbolism, and many believe the authors were the spiritual descendants of the Knights Templar, using this structure to continue their ancient mission of sacred concealment. The man behind this enigma was William Sinclair, the Earl of Caithness and a nobleman from a family with long and persistent rumors of deep ties to the outlawed order. It is said that when the Templars were violently suppressed in the early 14th century, many knights found refuge and protection with the Sinclair family in Scotland, bringing with them not just their sacred relics but their profound knowledge of symbolic encoding and architectural secrecy. Roslyn Chapel, then, is not a Templar building in the strict historical sense, but many see it as a posthumous testament to their ideals, a final vault constructed to safeguard their deepest secrets under the guise of a private family chapel. The interior of the chapel is an overwhelming symphony of stone, with thousands of individual carvings covering every arch, pillar, and corner. Among the biblical scenes and saints, there are images that seem to tell a different, more mysterious story. There are lush, leafy green men peering from the walls, ancient pagan symbols of rebirth and the life force of nature. There are American maize plants and aloe vera carved decades before Columbus supposedly discovered the New World, suggesting the Sinclairs possessed knowledge of distant lands from sources outside conventional history. And then there are the celestial symbols, stars, planets, and intricate patterns that mirror the night sky. This bewildering mix of themes has led researchers to propose that the chapel's layout is a precise astronomical map, or perhaps a three-dimensional representation of a specific biblical prophecy. For those who believe in the Templar connection, this is not random decoration. It is a complex series of clues. The placement of these symbols, their relationship to each other, and their orientation within the chapel could form a multi-layered code, a set of instructions that, if read correctly, would guide an initiate to a specific point, a hidden chamber or sealed cavity containing the Order's greatest treasure, perhaps even the most famous relic of all, the Holy Grail itself. The heart of this mystery, and the chapel's most famous feature, is the breathtakingly beautiful apprentice pillar. This central column is a masterpiece of stonework, featuring a complex spiral design entwined with vines, leaves, and flowers, all carved with an almost impossible delicacy. The legend surrounding it adds to its mystique. As the story goes, the master mason in charge of the pillar traveled to Rome to see the original design he was to copy, but during his absence, his young apprentice, inspired by a divine vision, carved the pillar himself. Upon returning and seeing the perfection of the work, the master mason was seized by a fit of jealous rage and struck the apprentice dead with his mallet. The pillar stands as a monument to the slain apprentice, and his face, along with that of his grieving mother, is said to be carved in a corner nearby. But beyond the poignant legend, many researchers believe the pillar is far more than a decorative element. Some suggest it is a symbolic representation of the tree of life from Kabbalistic tradition, or the biblical Jacob's ladder connecting earth to heaven. Others propose a more physical function, that the pillar is not solid stone at all, but a cleverly constructed container. The intricate winding vines might conceal seams, and the entire top of the pillar might be designed to unscrew or pivot, revealing a hollow core that could hold a sacred object, such as a small, ancient cup purported to be the Grail. Its central location makes it the focal point of the entire chapel, the perfect embodiment of the Templar principle of hiding something of immense value in the most prominent place imaginable. Beneath the chapel floor, the mystery deepens. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed the existence of a substantial subterranean space, a large chamber or vault directly beneath the chapel's foundation. This discovery gives tangible credence to the long-held legends of a secret crypt, a hidden repository that could very well hold the truth behind the Sinclair family's ambitious project. The entrance to this space has never been found, suggesting it was sealed with incredible ingenuity at the time of the chapel's construction. This would be entirely consistent with Templar methods, echoing their use of underground vaults in places like Tama. Furthermore, one of the pillars in the chapel has a section that resonates with a hollow sound when tapped, and another is carved with a pattern of 8 cubes, each marked with a unique symbol. Some researchers have tried to interpret these cubes as a musical score or a complex cipher, a code that, if deciphered, would reveal the mechanism for opening a passageway to the chamber below. The chapel, therefore, operates on multiple levels: the visible world of stunning art above ground, and the hinted-at silent world of concealed secrets below, a perfect architectural echo of the Templar duality of public devotion and private mystery. While the allure of treasure and the Holy Grail captures the popular imagination, the true legacy of Roslyn Chapel might be even more profound. It stands as the ultimate expression of the Templar spirit of encoding knowledge not in texts that could be burned, but in stone that could endure. In the centuries after the Order's dissolution, possessing explicit Templar loyalty was dangerous. Building a chapel that openly celebrated the Order was impossible. Instead, the Sinclair family, if they were indeed the inheritors of this tradition, created a monument that celebrated the ideas instead of the institution. The chapel is a library of symbols, a repository of esoteric knowledge spanning Christianity, paganism, astronomy, and geometry, all woven together into a cohesive whole that only those with the key could fully understand. It embodies the belief that sacred truth is not meant to be obvious or easily acquired. It must be sought, pondered, and earned through diligent study and spiritual readiness. Roslyn Chapel does not give up its secrets easily. It invites interpretation but resists conclusion. It suggests meaning but avoids declaration. In this way, it is the perfect testament to the Knights Templars' enduring legacy, a whisper in stone, a question carved into the very heart of history, challenging every visitor to look deeper, to see beyond the obvious, and to wonder what magnificent secrets might still be hidden, waiting patiently in the light for the right eyes to finally see them. Beyond the silent language of stone and symbol, the Templars wielded an even more elusive tool for concealment: the written word. They recognized that a story, a poem, or a seemingly obscure religious text could serve as the most durable and transportable vault of all, one that could cross borders and centuries without ever arousing suspicion. This literary dimension of their secrecy transformed their sacred duty into an art form, embedding vital truths within layers of allegory, metaphor, and encrypted prose. A manuscript stored in a monastery library, available for any scholar to read, might appear on the surface to be a conventional devotional work or a fanciful tale of chivalry. Yet, for the initiated brother who knew the key to its interpretation, that same text could contain precise directions, a map hidden not on parchment, but in the spaces between the lines, in the rhythm of the stanzas, or in the specific choice of symbolic characters. This method offered a brilliant advantage, even if the physical preceptory was razed to the ground and its stone code shattered. The knowledge of what was hidden and where could survive, preserved in a form that was both public and utterly private at the same time. The most powerful and enduring example of this is the vast body of literature surrounding the Holy Grail. While the Grail legend predates the Templars, it experienced a dramatic surge in popularity and complexity throughout the 12th and 13th centuries, precisely the period of the Order's greatest power and influence. Stories like Chrétien de Troyes Percival, Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival, and the sprawling Lancelot Grail cycle are far more than simple entertainment. They are intricate allegorical puzzles filled with descriptions of otherworldly castles, magical landscapes, and cryptic tests for the story's heroes. Scholars have long pondered why the Templars are so frequently and favorably depicted in these romances, often as the guardians of the Grail itself. One compelling theory suggests this was not fictional flattery, but a deliberate strategy. The descriptions of the Grail Castle, with its unusual layout, its specific number of windows, or the unique path a knight must take to approach it, might not be products of pure imagination. They could be carefully veiled architectural descriptions of real Templar structures, perhaps even a specific commandery known only to the inner circle. The quest narrative itself, with its emphasis on spiritual purity and the solving of riddles to achieve a sacred goal, perfectly mirrors the initiatory journey of a Templar knight being entrusted with the Order's deepest secrets. This practice extended beyond grand romances into more technical forms of writing. The Templars, with their vast banking network, were masters of early encryption and coded communication. They developed sophisticated ciphers for their financial documents to protect the sensitive information of their clients. It is a very small step to imagine they applied this same expertise to creating encrypted manuscripts that detailed relic locations. A seemingly dry inventory list of a preceptory's assets could, with the correct cipher key, transform into a set of coordinates or instructions. A column of numbers might not represent quantities of grain or wine, but rather paces to be taken from a specific landmark or the dimensions of a hidden compartment within a wall. They also utilized apocryphal texts, religious writings not included in the official biblical canon, which were often rich in symbolic and geographic detail about the Holy Land. A description of a forgotten spring or a particular rock formation from an ancient text could be cross-referenced with the Templars' own intimate knowledge of the terrain, creating a verbal map that was meaningless to anyone who hadn't walked the land themselves. The knowledge was broken into pieces. One brother might hold the cipher, another might know the relevant apocryphal text, and a third might have the geographic memory, ensuring that no single person could reconstruct the entire puzzle without the others. This literary approach to concealment fundamentally transformed storytelling from a pastime into a powerful instrument of preservation. It ensured that crucial knowledge was not stored in a single, vulnerable location, but was disseminated widely in a disguised form. A troubadour could sing a Grail romance in a royal court, and the nobles would hear a thrilling tale of adventure, while a Templar listening in the crowd might hear a detailed set of instructions being passed from one generation to the next. The secret was protected by its own ubiquity. It was hidden in the most open forum possible. This method required a deeply cultured and educated inner circle within the Order, knights who were as comfortable with poetry and theology as they were with sword and shield. It reflects a sophistication that is often overlooked in popular depictions of them as mere warriors. They were keepers of stories, understanding that a narrative, once set loose in the world, takes on a life of its own, outliving empires and surviving the destruction of physical vaults. Their greatest treasures were protected not by locks but by layers of meaning, ensuring that only those with the right key, a key of knowledge, faith, and insight, would ever be able to unlock the truth hidden within the tale. For centuries, the secrets of the Templar Vaults were locked away in the realm of legend, accessible only through cryptic manuscripts and local folklore. But the modern era has ushered in a new age of discovery, one where advanced technology is finally allowing us to peer through stone and soil to verify these ancient tales. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, has become one of the most powerful tools in this archaeological arsenal. This technology works by sending high-frequency radio waves into the ground and measuring the reflected signals, allowing researchers to create a detailed three-dimensional map of subsurface structures without ever lifting a shovel. It's like giving historians a set of X-ray glasses to see through floors and walls, revealing the hidden geometry of the past. In the iconic Templar convent of Toma in Portugal, GPR surveys have detected startling anomalies deep beneath the famous charola, the order's round church. The data suggests a network of previously unknown chambers and passageways, their layout and depth consistent with the legendary subterranean complex described in local tradition but never before documented. These aren't just empty spaces. The radar signatures hint at structural features, perhaps walls, pillars, or even sealed containers waiting silently in the dark, confirming that the stories of a hidden city under the convent are more than just myth. From the depths of the earth to the sweeping vistas of the landscape, light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, is revolutionizing our view of Templar activities. This technology uses laser pulses fired from an aircraft to create incredibly precise topographic maps, effectively stripping away vegetation to reveal the bare earth and any human-made features upon it. When deployed over regions with known Templar connections, like the Languedoc in southern France or the Scottish borders, LiDAR has unveiled a stunning hidden geography. It has exposed the faint, ghostly outlines of long-vanished preceptories, their foundation stones buried for centuries under farmland and forest. More importantly, it has traced the subtle paths of ancient processional ways and defensive earthworks connecting these sites, suggesting a carefully planned and strategically hidden network of communication and transport. These lost roads, invisible from the ground, could have been the very routes used to move relics between commanderies under the cover of secrecy, their discovery providing a tangible map of the Order's covert operations across the European countryside. Yet, technology alone is not enough. The true breakthroughs occur when these scientific scans are married with painstaking historical analysis. Researchers are now cross-referencing GPR and LiDAR data with forgotten trial documents, ancient property records, and even the marginalia scribbled in medieval ledgers. A seemingly insignificant financial entry noting the purchase of a specific type of stone or the payment to a particular mason can, when combined with a radar scan showing an anomaly in a wall, point directly to a concealed compartment. In the Occitania region of France, this multidisciplinary approach has borne remarkable fruit. Scholars studying the walls of a ruined Templar chapel noticed a series of seemingly random mason's marks and coded inscriptions that had long been dismissed as graffiti. But by digitizing and analyzing these symbols with new software, they detected a repeating pattern. When this pattern was superimposed onto a floor plan generated by GPR, it aligned perfectly with the location of a subterranean void. Subsequent careful excavation confirmed the discovery, a small, perfectly sealed ossuary that had been untouched for over 700 years. While its contents remain a closely guarded secret, the find validates the incredible sophistication of the Templar system, proving that their buildings were indeed literal puzzles, with the clues to their secrets etched into the very fabric of their walls. Each of these discoveries does more than just validate a historical account. It fundamentally changes our understanding of the Templars' capabilities. The precision of the hidden chambers, the complexity of the symbolic codes, and the sheer scale of the underground networks all speak to a level of architectural and organizational genius that was previously unimaginable. It shows that their methods were not the stuff of fantasy, but were instead the products of meticulous planning and execution, rivaling the engineering feats of the greatest civilizations. The hunt for their secrets is no longer the domain of amateur treasure hunters. It has evolved into a rigorous scientific discipline, a partnership between cutting-edge technology and traditional historical scholarship. This collaboration ensures that the search is conducted with respect for these historic sites, preserving their integrity while gently unraveling their mysteries. The work is slow, methodical, and often frustrating, but every new radar echo, every laser-mapped pathway, and every decoded symbol brings us one step closer to hearing the faint, long silent whisper of the nights themselves, reminding us that the most enduring secrets are not always buried deepest, but are often hidden in the last place we thought to look with our most advanced tools. All of these incredible discoveries and the enduring allure of the Templars' secrets have, over the centuries, given rise to a shadow world of speculation, where historical fact and fantastical fiction have become deeply and sometimes inextricably intertwined. It is a landscape populated by tales of the Holy Grail bestowing immortality, of the Ark of the Covenant unleashing divine power, of hidden maps to a lost continent, and of the Order's survival as a secret society pulling the strings of global history. While these stories are undeniably compelling, they often act as a thick fog, obscuring the genuine, and in many ways more remarkable, historical reality of the Knights Templar. To truly honor their legacy, we must carefully part this curtain of myth and focus on what the concrete evidence tells us. The Templars were not mystical guardians of otherworldly secrets. They were pragmatic, devout, and brilliantly strategic men of their time, operating under immense pressure in a volatile and dangerous world. Their primary motivation for concealment was not to hide knowledge from humanity, but to protect sacred objects from very tangible, very human threats, the greed of rival powers, the devastation of warfare, and the catastrophic political upheaval that ultimately consumed their order. Consider the most pervasive modern legend, the Templars' deep connection to the Freemasons. This theory suggests that after their suppression, the surviving knights went underground and eventually re-emerged as the speculative Freemasonry we know today, passing their esoteric secrets down through the centuries. While it makes for a fantastic narrative, the historical timeline simply doesn't align. The documented origins of modern Freemasonry lie in the guilds of stonemasons from the late medieval period, and it only began to adopt its characteristic philosophical and symbolic elements in the 17th and 18th centuries, hundreds of years after the Templars were dissolved. Any connections drawn are largely symbolic and retrospective, a romantic grafting of one mysterious tradition onto another by later writers and thinkers, not a direct historical lineage. Similarly, the idea that the Templars discovered and hid mind-bending relics of non-human origin or possessed knowledge of advanced ancient technologies places a modern science fiction lens onto a medieval mindset. For a 13th century knight, the ultimate power was divine, not technological. A fragment of the true cross was powerful because it connected him to the Passion of Christ, not because it might have contained a unique energy signature or alien alloy. Imposing these contemporary concepts onto them strips the Templars of their true identity and the profound authenticity of their medieval faith. So why have these myths proven so incredibly durable and appealing? They fulfill a deep human desire for mystery and for a hidden history that is more dramatic and consequential than the one we find in the archives. The Templars' sudden rise, their immense power, and their shocking, abrupt fall create a perfect vacuum, a mystery that demands an explanation grand enough to match its scale. It is far more thrilling to believe they were destroyed for guarding a terrifying secret than for the more mundane, though equally dramatic, historical truth. They were brought down by a bankrupt king covetous of their wealth and a weak pope unwilling to stop him. The myths also provide a sense of continuity and hope. The idea that the Order and its secrets survived in the shadows suggests that a thread of ancient wisdom and chivalric ideals persisted through the ages, offering an alternative to the often messy and disappointing narrative of conventional history. These stories are not without value. They are a testament to the powerful mark the Templars left on the Western imagination, but they must be recognized for what they are: cultural folklore, not historical fact. The tools for separating this folklore from fact, however, are readily available to us. We must return to the primary sources, the actual documents from the time. The extensive records from the Templar trials, despite being extracted under torture and therefore heavily contaminated with coerced falsehoods, still provide invaluable clues. In the vast inventories of seized property from their preceptories across France and England, what is conspicuously absent can be as telling as what is present. The meticulous clerks of King Philip IV recorded every piece of silver plate, every parcel of land, every bushel of grain, but they rarely, if ever, noted the discovery of the kind of outlandish relics or heretical objects described in the sensational charges. This silence speaks volumes. It suggests that the Order's true treasures, their sacred relics, had already been effectively hidden or dispersed through the very methods we've been exploring, leaving the king's men to confiscate only the obvious, mundane wealth. Furthermore, the architectural and archaeological evidence, as we've seen with modern technology, points toward concealment methods that are ingenious but ultimately practical: hidden compartments, underground chambers, and symbolic codes. These are the inventions of master strategists and architects, not the guardians of interdimensional portals. By clearing away the undergrowth of modern conspiracy, we can see the Templars' achievements with greater clarity and ultimately with greater respect. Their true legacy is not one of occult mystery, but of breathtaking human ingenuity, profound devotion, and sophisticated organizational skill in the face of existential threats. They were not superhuman keepers of cosmic secrets. They were men who did something far more relatable and, in a way, more inspiring. They took their sacred duty to protect the objects that defined their faith with such immense seriousness that they devoted their lives to outthinking every possible adversary. They turned their churches into puzzles, their rituals into disguises, and their entire network into a decentralized security system. This grounded perspective doesn't diminish their story, it elevates it. It transforms them from characters in a fantastical legend into real, complex historical actors whose response to peril was a brilliant, multifaceted, and ultimately successful campaign of preservation. Understanding the practical reality behind their secrecy allows us to appreciate the authentic stakes of their mission and the true weight of the silence they left behind. A silence that was not a challenge to future treasure hunters, but the final, successful outcome of their most solemn vow to protect what they held dear. This profound approach to concealment reveals a spiritual dimension that was every bit as important as the practical one. For the Templar Knight, the act of hiding a sacred relic was not merely a tactical maneuver. It was a lived expression of their deepest theological beliefs, a physical prayer enacted in stone and ritual. They operated from a core Christian paradox, one echoed in the Gospels, that the last shall be first, the meek shall inherit the earth, and that God's greatest power is often made perfect in weakness. By deliberately choosing to place the most potent symbols of their faith not on golden thrones under armed guard, but within the grain of a wooden plow handle or behind the soot of a fireplace, they were making a radical statement about the very nature of holiness. They were asserting that divinity does not always announce itself with fanfare and brilliance. More often, it whispers, residing in the humble, the overlooked, and the seemingly insignificant corners of existence. This practice was a direct rebuke to the pride and ostentation that could often accompany earthly power, even within the church itself. It was a way to protect the relics not just from thieves, but from the potentially corrosive effects of their own fame, ensuring they remained objects of authentic veneration rather than political trophies. This philosophy transformed the entire Templar commandery into a spiritual training ground, a landscape designed to cultivate a specific kind of seeing. For the brother who knew the secrets, his daily life became a continuous exercise in contemplative devotion. Walking through the chapel, he would see the very same things as a visiting pilgrim or a new initiate: the altar, the statues, the tools in the barn, but his perception was layered with a deeper, hidden reality. That ordinary-looking column wasn't just a column, it was a silent guardian. The common chest at the foot of his bed wasn't just for storage, it was a sacred ark. This constant, silent awareness would have fostered a state of mindfulness and reverence, training him to look beyond surface appearances in all things. It was a practical lesson in the idea that the kingdom of heaven is within, and that the divine is embedded in the fabric of the everyday world, waiting to be recognized by those with the eyes to see and the heart to understand. His faith was no longer just about reciting prayers or attending Mass. It was an active, participatory hunt for grace hidden in plain sight, a daily reaffirmation of his vows to seek and protect what truly mattered. This spiritual practice also redefined the relationship between the seeker and the sacred. In a world where major relics in great cathedrals were often put on lavish display for pilgrims to view from a distance, the Templar method was intensely personal and required effort. For the initiated knight, accessing a relic wasn't a passive act of viewing. It was an active ritual of remembrance and recovery. It might involve knowing the correct sequence to move a stone, or the precise way to unscrew the base of a chalice. This physical process mirrored the inner, spiritual journey of the soul toward God, a path that requires diligence, patience, knowledge, and a pure intention. The seeking itself became a form of worship, as important as the eventual moment of connection. It taught that spiritual truth is not simply handed over, it is earned through faithful pursuit and right understanding. The hidden relic became a powerful metaphor for the divine presence itself, which is always near yet often concealed, revealed only to those who approach with humility, love, and a sincere desire to find. Ultimately, the Templars' genius was in weaving together the practical and the mystical into an inseparable whole. Their security strategies were brilliant because they were born from a profound spiritual insight, and their spiritual insights were given concrete form through their ingenious practical methods. The hollowed-out plowshare was both a perfect hiding spot and a perfect symbol of their identity as poor fellow soldiers, a reminder that God's power is made perfect in poverty and service. The secret chamber beneath the altar was both a secure vault and the ultimate expression of the belief that the most holy things should be placed at the very heart of their worship, quite literally forming the foundation of their spiritual life. In this way, they left behind a legacy that is far more challenging than a simple treasure map. They left us with a question about how we perceive value and where we expect to find meaning. They challenge us to consider whether the most important things in our own lives, be they love, truth, or purpose, are always loud and obvious, or if they might be quietly hidden in the ordinary, waiting for us to learn how to see them. To truly grasp the singular genius of the Templars' approach to safeguarding sacred objects, we must place them in the context of their time, examining how their closest counterparts operated. The medieval landscape was dotted with powerful religious orders, each with its own mission, philosophy, and methods of protecting the precious relics entrusted to them. The Knights Hospitaller, officially known as the Order of Knights of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, present the most direct and fascinating point of comparison. Founded around the same time as the Templars, with a similar initial purpose of aiding pilgrims in the Holy Land, the two orders were like siblings who chose radically different paths. The Hospitaller's entire ethos was built around hospitality and care, a mission that logically extended to the public veneration of relics. For them, a sacred object was not just an article of faith, it was a centerpiece of their spiritual economy. They constructed magnificent chapels and elaborate reliquaries, gilded, bejeweled, and ornate, to display these items prominently. The goal was to attract a constant stream of pilgrims, whose donations of money and goods would fund their extensive charitable works, including their famous hospitals. Their security, therefore, was one of overt strength and visibility, heavy locks, fortified display cases, and a constant guard presence. The relic was a public treasure, and its protection was a very public display of power and piety. This stood in stark opposition to the Templar way, where the relic's value was so immense that its greatest protection was its absolute invisibility. Another critical comparison lies with the Cistercian monks, a purely monastic order with no military function but a profound influence on the medieval world, particularly through their architectural innovations. The Cistercians, led by the formidable Bernard of Clairvaux, who was also the Templars' great patron, embraced an aesthetic of stark austerity and brutal simplicity. They believed that elaborate decoration was a distraction from God and forbade it in their abbeys. Their immense, soaring stone churches were devoid of colorful frescoes, stained glass, or sculpted reliefs. This created an environment of pure, unadorned space intended to elevate the soul directly to the divine. For the Cistercians, the security of a relic was found in this overwhelming atmosphere of silent, severe reverence. A sacred object might be kept in a plain wooden box behind the main altar, its power emanating from its spiritual significance rather than its physical container. Their method was one of psychological and environmental security, using the sheer imposing nature of their architecture and the disciplined silence of their liturgy to deter any form of sacrilege. While the Templars also used architecture as a tool, they did so to conceal and encode, not to overwhelm through austerity. The Cistercians hid relics in plain sight by making them seem unremarkable in a plain setting. The Templars hid them in plain sight by making them indistinguishable from the remarkable setting itself. This divergence in strategy reveals the core of what made the Templars unique, their unprecedented dual identity. They were the only order that seamlessly blended the life of a cloistered monk with the life of a battlefield soldier. The Hospitallers eventually developed a military wing, but they remained primarily caregivers. The Cistercians were builders and prayerful contemplatives. The Templars alone were both, and this fusion is the key to understanding their innovative secrecy. The monk in them understood the profound spiritual gravity of a relic, the need to protect its sanctity from the corrupting influence of pride and politics. The soldier in them understood tactics, misdirection, and the harsh reality that the strongest fortress walls could eventually be breached. Their solution was a form of security that didn't rely on walls alone. It was a security built on intelligence and psychology. They applied a soldier's understanding of battlefield deception to a monk's most sacred duty. They realized that the best way to protect something was to make the enemy believe it wasn't even there, or that it was something not worth taking. This hybrid mindset is why they alone saw the potential in a hollow column or a plow handle. The monk revered the object hidden within, while the soldier appreciated the tactical perfection of the hiding place itself. Ultimately, these comparisons show us that the Templars were not just slightly more secretive, they were operating on a completely different conceptual plane. The Hospitallers' display method and the Cistercians' austere method were both brilliant in their own right, but they were essentially variations on traditional themes of protection through strength or piety. The Templars invented a new theme altogether: protection through obscurity. They were the medieval equivalent of cybersecurity experts hiding a crucial file within the code of a popular video game, while everyone else was still building bigger safes. Their legacy is one of breathtaking intellectual creativity, born from the unique pressures of their existence. They remind us that true innovation often occurs at the intersection of seemingly unrelated fields, in their case, the battlefield and the cloister. By understanding what the other orders did, we can finally see the Templars not as shadowy figures from a conspiracy theory, but as pragmatic visionaries who solved an ancient problem with a solution so clever and so effective that their secrets, and perhaps their treasures, remain protected to this day. The sudden and brutal dissolution of the Knights Templar in the early 14th century did not just shatter an order. It triggered a vast and chaotic scramble for their possessions, a silent war over the spiritual and material wealth they had so carefully guarded. On that fateful Friday, the 13th in October 1307, when King Philip IV's men swept across France to arrest the knights, their first targets were the obvious repositories of wealth, the treasury houses, the strongboxes, and the vaults. These were systematically inventoried and seized, their contents gold, silver, land deeds, and financial records absorbed into the royal coffers or transferred to their rivals, the Knights Hospitaller, by order of the Pope. But the official inventories from this great confiscation tell a curious and telling story. They meticulously list every ounce of silver plate, every piece of armor, every bushel of grain stored in their barns. What they almost entirely fail to record are the sacred relics, the very objects that were at the heart of the most sensational charges of idolatry and heresy leveled against the order. This glaring absence is the first great clue that the Templars' sophisticated methods of concealment had, in their final hour, proven stunningly effective. The king's men, driven by greed and haste, found the decoys but missed the true treasures hidden in the walls, the altars, and the earth beneath their feet. In the immediate aftermath, many relics that were found did follow a formal, official path. Papal bulls issued after the suppression ordered that the Templars' sacred objects, particularly those used for public worship, be transferred to other ecclesiastical institutions to ensure they remained in the hands of the Church. It is highly likely that items like altar cloths, common chalices, and publicly displayed reliquaries from smaller, less secretive preceptories were handed over to local cathedrals or monasteries under the supervision of bishops loyal to the Pope. In these new homes, these objects lost their Templar identity, their provenance fading into a generic ecclesiastical history. A beautiful monstrance that once sat on a Templar altar might, generations later, be assumed to have always been a possession of the Hospitallers or a local diocese, its previous guardians forgotten by all but the dusty archives. This process of quiet integration was one way the Church sought to maintain control over the spiritual narrative and prevent the Templars' legacy from becoming a rallying point for dissent. Yet for every relic that entered the official record, countless others simply vanished from history, leaving behind a vacuum filled with speculation, legend, and a relentless centuries-long hunt. This is where the story fractures into a dozen different possibilities, each more intriguing than the last. One compelling theory suggests that in the days and weeks leading up to the mass arrests, as the ominous rumblings of the king's plans reached the highest ranks of the order, a desperate and clandestine operation was launched. Trusted knights, using the very underground networks and remote geographic caches they had built for this exact purpose, would have moved the most precious items under cover of darkness. The fleet of Templar ships that vanished from their base at La Rochelle is often at the center of this legend, said to have been laden not with gold, but with sacred cargo, perhaps even the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail sailing to unknown destinations. Scotland, a country at odds with the Pope and offering refuge from the French king, is a perennial favorite for this hidden treasure, with Roslyn Chapel standing as a later, symbolic monument to this enduring belief. Portugal, where the order was simply reformed and renamed the Order of Christ, is another logical sanctuary, with its own deep well of rumors regarding secrets still hidden within the convent at Tama. The human element of this dispersal is perhaps the most poignant. Many knights who avoided arrest or torture are believed to have gone into hiding, blending back into secular society, or finding refuge with noble families who had been their patrons. It is not difficult to imagine a small group of these men, the last guardians of a terrible and sacred secret, ensuring the survival of their charge not by hiding it in a new building, but by entrusting it to a sympathetic Cistercian abbot or a devout local lord. In this scenario, the relic would have been passed down through generations within a single family, its origins gradually fading into a half-remembered family legend, its true significance known only to a select few. This would mean that some of Christendom's most sought-after relics might not be in a dank cave or a forgotten tunnel, but could potentially reside today in the private chapel of an old European estate, their owners unaware of the immense historical and spiritual weight of the heirloom they possess. The most haunting possibility of all is that the Templars' secrecy was ultimately too effective. The compartmentalization of knowledge, designed to protect the whole if any single part was captured, may have meant that the last men who knew the locations of certain caches died without passing on the information, either in the king's prisons, on the pyre with Jacques de Molay, or later of old age in obscurity. This presents the tantalizing, almost archaeological possibility that these sacred objects remain exactly where the Templars left them over 700 years ago. They could still lie in a lead-lined cavity within the wall of a French farmhouse that was once a Templar barn, or in a dry, cool crevice in a coastal cave in Ireland, or at the base of a specific carved tree in a German forest that has long since been cut down. They are not lost in the dramatic sense of a sunken ship or a collapsed mine, but lost through the simple, silent passage of time and the extinction of a single thread of memory. This final, silent victory of the Templar system is a powerful testament to their commitment. They promised to protect their treasures, and in many cases, they may have done so forever, taking the final map to the grave with them. This unresolved mystery, this sense of a story left hanging, is what continues to draw us in, compelling us to keep looking, to keep wondering what might still be out there, waiting silently in the light of the everyday world for its secret to be discovered once more. And so the hunt continues, but the tools of the search have undergone a revolution as profound as the secrets we seek to uncover. We've moved from the realm of speculative legend into an age of precise, non-invasive scientific inquiry, where the silent stones of Templar commanderies are finally beginning to speak, not through cryptic symbols but through data. Imagine a device no larger than a suitcase being wheeled slowly across the flagstone floor of a centuries-old chapel. This is a ground-penetrating radar unit, and it is essentially giving us the power of sight through solid matter. It works by pulsing high-frequency radio waves into the ground and then listening intently to the echoes that bounce back. Every different material, solid limestone, a hollow void, a cache of metal, damp soil, returns a unique signature. To an archaeologist, the readout from this device is a thrilling subsurface map, revealing the ghostly outlines of what lies beneath. The straight, unnatural lines of a man-made tunnel behind an altar, the circular anomaly of a buried cistern that doesn't appear on any historical blueprint, or the distinct rectangular signature of a potential ossuary hidden just beneath our feet. This technology allows us to peer into the earth without ever lifting a trowel, preserving the integrity of these sacred sites while satisfying our insatiable curiosity about what the Templars left behind. From the depths of the earth, we now look to the skies for answers. The advent of affordable drone technology has completely transformed landscape archaeology, particularly in the search for the Order's more remote outposts. A Templar hermitage hidden in the rugged forests of the Languedoc or a forgotten coastal watchtower in Scotland might have been nearly impossible to map from the ground, its full layout obscured by dense undergrowth and difficult terrain. But equipped with high-resolution cameras and LiDAR sensors, a drone can soar above these sites, systematically capturing thousands of overlapping photographs. Through a process called photogrammetry, these images are stitched together into incredibly detailed 3D models of the landscape, allowing researchers to study every contour and ruin from every angle on a computer screen. Even more powerful is LiDAR, which uses laser pulses to digitally strip away the vegetation, revealing the bare earth beneath. This has led to stunning discoveries of entirely forgotten footpaths, the foundations of long-vanished outbuildings, and subtle earthworks that hint at a much larger, more complex network of Templar activity than was previously thought. These aerial perspectives are like finally seeing the full board in a game of chess, revealing the strategic connections between sites that were once considered isolated and independent. Yet the most profound breakthroughs are happening not in the field, but in the quiet hum of the laboratory and the vast, interconnected silence of the digital archive. Sophisticated chemical analysis techniques can now detect the faintest traces of history. A team might take a microcore sample from the mortar of a suspicious-looking wall in a place like Tama. Back in the lab, they can analyze its chemical composition, looking for anomalies. Does it contain a different ratio of materials than the mortar used in the rest of the building? This could indicate a later repair or a sealed-up opening. Similarly, airborne particulate matter collected from inside a hollow altar or a sealed crypt can be analyzed for pollen, spores, or specific organic compounds that might suggest what was once stored there, perhaps the faint, enduring scent of embalming resins or the specific wax used to seal reliquaries. Meanwhile, in the digital realm, historians and data scientists are building vast relational databases. They are inputting every piece of information available: translated trial documents, property records, the travel itineraries of high-ranking knights, and geographic coordinates of known sites. By cross-referencing these immense datasets, powerful algorithms can identify previously unnoticed patterns. A particular knight's repeated visits to an otherwise insignificant manor, or a shipment of a specific type of stone that only appears in buildings with known hidden chambers. This digital detective work connects dots that human researchers working with paper and parchment alone could never have seen. However, for all our technological prowess, we are constantly reminded that we are pitting 21st century science against a level of medieval cunning that was, in its own way, just as advanced. Our ground-penetrating radar might reveal a void, but it cannot tell us how to open it if the mechanism is a counterweighted stone that requires a specific sequence of pressure points to activate. Our drones can map a landscape, but they cannot decipher the meaning behind a constellation of symbols carved into a chapel roof that only aligns with the stars on a specific saint's day. The Templars designed their secrets to be found by minds, not machines. They built locks that required a key of knowledge, faith, and intuition. The greatest challenge we face is that the most perfect hiding places are those that offer no physical anomaly for our instruments to detect. A relic sealed within the foundation stone of a building during its construction is, for all intents and purposes, a part of the structure itself, invisible to radar and chemical analysis. The true map was not drawn on parchment. It was encoded in rituals, whispered in initiation rites, and memorized by trusted knights. Technology can show us the where, but it often cannot reveal the how or the why. It provides the pieces of the puzzle, but the act of assembly still requires a human touch, a scholar's intuition, a historian's context, and a deep, empathetic understanding of the medieval mind that conceived these brilliant deceptions in the first place. But this thrilling pursuit, this high-tech treasure hunt for history's greatest secrets, inevitably brings us to a profound and deeply important crossroads. We must pause and ask ourselves not just if we can find these objects, but if we should. The quest to uncover Templar relics is not a neutral scientific exercise. It is an endeavor fraught with complex ethical dilemmas that strike at the very heart of why these objects were hidden in the first place. The Templars themselves were not merely hiding treasure. They were acting as sacred guardians, protecting items they believed held immense spiritual power from those who would misuse, desecrate, or exploit them. Their entire methodology was built on a foundation of profound reverence. To now burst into these spaces with our ground-penetrating radar and drilling equipment, treating these potential finds as mere artifacts or academic trophies, risks committing the very act of violation the knights dedicated their lives to preventing. We must carefully consider whether our modern curiosity and desire for historical knowledge outweigh the original, sacred intent of those who went to such extraordinary lengths to ensure these items remained safe and sanctified. One of the most pressing questions is what should happen to a relic if it is indeed discovered. Should it be extracted from its hiding place, catalogued, and placed behind glass in a museum for millions of visitors to view? There is undeniable value in this public display. It allows for scholarly study, carbon dating, and material analysis that can authenticate the object and teach us invaluable lessons about medieval craftsmanship, trade routes, and religious practices. It makes history tangible, allowing people from all over the world to stand in the presence of an object that has captivated the human imagination for centuries. Public display can democratize access to history, breaking it out of the realm of dusty textbooks and turning it into a living, breathing connection to the past. For many, seeing a relic with their own eyes can be a powerful, even moving experience. However, this approach stands in stark contrast to the alternative, leaving the relic exactly where it was found, undisturbed and in situ. This path argues for respecting the wishes of the original guardians. The Templars did not hide these objects for them to be found and put on display. They hid them to protect them from exactly that kind of exposure. For believing Christians, these are not mere historical curiosities. They are sacred objects of veneration, believed to retain a connection to the divine. Tearing them from their consecrated hiding places could be viewed as a profound act of spiritual disrespect, a modern-day desecration that prioritizes historical curiosity over religious sanctity. Furthermore, removal can irrevocably destroy the context of the find. A relic hidden within an altar is part of a larger spiritual and architectural statement. Removing it severs that connection, turning a multifaceted piece of sacred art into an isolated museum exhibit and potentially diminishing our full understanding of its purpose and meaning. This debate extends far beyond the walls of museums and chapels, directly impacting the living communities connected to these sites. The discovery of a major Templar relic in a small French village or a Scottish town would be an event of seismic proportions. It could trigger a massive influx of tourists, media, and commercial interest, fundamentally altering the character and daily life of that community. Local authorities would have to grapple with the immense logistical challenges of managing crowds, preserving the site, and protecting the find from theft. While this could bring economic benefits through tourism, it could also lead to exploitation, rising costs of living, and the transformation of a quiet place of worship into a chaotic spectacle. The very essence of the site, its peace and sanctity, could be lost forever. Archaeologists and historians therefore have a deep responsibility to engage with these local communities from the very beginning of any search, involving them in the decision-making process and ensuring that any potential discovery benefits and respects the people who have been the true stewards of the land for generations, long after the Templars were gone. Ultimately, navigating this ethical labyrinth requires a delicate and respectful balance. It calls for a collaborative approach that brings together archaeologists, historians, theologians, local community leaders, and representatives of the Christian faith. The goal should not be a rushed extraction for fame or profit, but a mindful stewardship that honors the past while responsibly engaging with the present. This might mean that in some cases, after careful documentation and non-invasive study using tools like 3D scanning, a relic is respectfully resealed in its resting place, its secret preserved as its guardians intended. In other instances, a mutually agreed upon plan for careful extraction and reverent display might be the right path. The key is that the search for knowledge is conducted with humility, acknowledging that these objects represent more than just historical data. They represent centuries of faith, devotion, and a sacred promise made by a group of knights who believed some secrets were meant to be kept, not uncovered. It might seem like a leap to connect medieval warrior monks to the high-stakes world of modern intelligence and cybersecurity, but the conceptual bridge is both solid and astonishing. The Knights Templar were, in essence, early masters of operational security, a term we now define as the practice of protecting the details of an operation to prevent information from falling into the wrong hands. Their entire system of compartmentalization, where no single knight knew the full scope of their secrets, is a principle that is absolutely foundational to modern espionage and corporate security. Think of a CIA field agent on a mission. They are given only the information absolutely necessary to complete their specific task. They don't know the identities of other agents in the network, the full strategy, or the location of other safe houses. This is not just for their protection, but for the protection of the entire operation. If they are captured or compromised, the damage they can cause is limited. The Templars implemented this exact model centuries ago. A knight guarding a remote hermitage in Scotland knew the secret of that location, but he almost certainly had no knowledge of the vaults beneath the Paris Temple. This decentralized model of information control ensured the Order's resilience and is a direct precursor to the need-to-know protocols that govern every major intelligence agency and military unit on the planet today. Their genius for psychological misdirection, making the valuable appear worthless and the sacred seem ordinary, finds a powerful echo in the tradecraft of modern spies. A Templar hiding a fragment of the true cross inside the well-worn handle of a farming tool was employing the same principle that a Cold War operative used when turning an ordinary, hollowed-out rock into a dead drop for microfilm. In both cases, the object's immense value is concealed by its overwhelming mundanity. Today, this concept has evolved into sophisticated steganography, the practice of hiding a secret message within an ordinary, non-secret message. A terrorist might embed coordinates for an attack within the pixels of a harmless-looking vacation photo posted on a public social media feed. A corporate whistleblower might use innocuous language in a public product review to signal that a document drop has occurred. The principle is identical to the Templars using coded graffiti or specific stained glass imagery. The message is hidden in plain sight, visible to all but understandable only to those who possess the key. The human brain is still the same organ it was 800 years ago, wired to overlook the familiar and focus on the anomalous. The Templars understood this cognitive blind spot intimately and designed their entire security strategy around it, a practice that remains on the cutting edge of deception today. This philosophy extends powerfully into the physical design of 21st-century secure facilities. The most advanced vaults in the world are no longer hidden in remote, fortified bunkers. That's the first place any thief would look. Instead, the most secure data centers and storage facilities are often located in the most unexpected places, applying the Templar principle of geographic and architectural misdirection on a grand scale. There is a famous, rumored data haven built inside a decommissioned nuclear bunker beneath a Swiss mountain, its entrance disguised as an ordinary maintenance shed. Another renowned security company stores priceless assets in a vault hidden deep beneath a busy commercial street in London, its entrance concealed within a bustling, completely ordinary-looking luggage shop. These are not crude hiding places, they are masterclasses in perception management, directly mirroring the Templar tactic of building a secret crypt beneath a public chapel. The security of these modern facilities relies on the same psychological trick. The most obvious location for a treasure is the most heavily guarded, but the safest location is the one that doesn't appear to be a target at all. By embedding their most valuable assets within a completely normal civilian environment, they become functionally invisible to anyone without explicit inside knowledge. Perhaps the most profound lesson we can take from the Templars is their holistic approach to security. They never relied on a single method. Their protection was a multi-layered system: physical security in their fortified castles, geographic security in their remote hiding spots, architectural security in their concealed compartments, and human security through their oaths and initiations. This defense-in-depth strategy is the gold standard in modern security, whether for a national power grid or a personal online identity. We protect our digital lives not just with one strong password, but with two-factor authentication, biometric scans, encrypted connections, and behavioral monitoring. A bank protects its money with armed guards, but also with time-locked vaults, motion sensors, and complex alarm systems that alert external authorities. The failure of one layer does not mean the failure of the whole system. The Templars exemplified this perfectly. If an enemy breached the outer walls of a commandery, they still had to contend with hidden doors. If they found a hidden door, they might only find a decoy chest of silver. The real treasure was elsewhere, protected by another layer of secrecy. Their system was resilient, adaptive, and brilliantly redundant. Ultimately, the enduring relevance of the Templars' methods reminds us that while our technology has advanced at a breathtaking pace, the fundamental nature of the threats we face, human greed, curiosity, and aggression, has not changed. They were protecting tangible objects of faith and power. We now protect digital packets of data and information that hold immense value. The battlefield has shifted from the physical world to the virtual one, but the war between concealment and discovery remains the same. By looking back at their ingenious solutions, we are not just studying dusty history, we are consulting master strategists. Their legacy challenges us to think more creatively about our own security, to look beyond stronger locks and longer passwords, and to consider how we might hide our own modern treasures in the last place anyone would ever think to look. Their most valuable relic was not a piece of wood or a cup, but a timeless principle. That true security lies not in making something impossible to steal, but in making it impossible to find. And so we arrive at the final, and perhaps most profound, lesson left to us by these masterful guardians of the sacred. The true legacy of the Knights Templar is not a map to a hidden treasure chest, nor is it a simple collection of clever historical tricks. It is something far more powerful and enduring, a mindset, a unique way of perceiving the world that challenges our most basic assumptions about where value and meaning truly reside. Their genius was in recognizing a fundamental truth that we so often forget, that the most powerful secrets are not always buried in darkness, but are often resting patiently in the light, hidden by the sheer force of their own familiarity. They understood that human attention is a spotlight, and that we consistently illuminate the dramatic, the new, and the obvious, while leaving vast landscapes of the ordinary and the everyday shrouded in a blindness of our own making. Their entire system of security was, at its heart, a profound philosophical statement, a belief that divinity and profound significance are woven into the very fabric of the mundane, waiting not to be discovered by force, but to be recognized by a shift in perception. This legacy of quiet obscurity over bold display continues to captivate us because it speaks to a deep, almost primal, human desire. In an age of overwhelming information and constant, noisy spectacle, the idea that profound truths are waiting silently, just beyond the glare of the spotlight, is incredibly compelling. It suggests that wisdom and wonder are not the exclusive domain of experts or adventurers to far-flung places, but are accessible to anyone willing to cultivate a more thoughtful, observant way of being. The Templars invite us to become modern-day seekers, not by equipping us with shovels and metal detectors, but by gifting us with a new lens through which to view our own surroundings. They urge us to ask not just "what is that?" but "what else could it be?" This shift from passive seeing to active seeking transforms a simple walk through an old building, a glance at a piece of art, or even a moment of routine into a potential act of discovery. Their greatest treasure, then, is not the relic itself, but the timeless question they force us to confront about the nature of reality and our place within it. As we close this journey into their hidden world, the challenge they extend to each of us is both simple and revolutionary. Look around your own life, at the objects on your desk, the architecture of your daily commute, the routines you perform without a second thought. What small, quiet mysteries might be lying in plain sight, not as historical artifacts, but as moments of beauty, connection, or insight that you've trained yourself to overlook? The Templar spirit asks us to apply their principle of sacred observation to our own modern existence, to find the extraordinary woven into the ordinary. Their enduring legacy is this invitation to become keepers of our own secrets, guardians of the hidden depth in our own everyday reality. We would love to hear what you discover. Share your thoughts on the mysteries in your world in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the hidden past, be sure to subscribe for more adventures where we continue to look beyond the obvious to